Hello, my name is Sasha Farbach for tvpworld, and I have the pleasure now to speak about all things U.S. policy with former U.S. Ambassador Daniel Fried, who joins me now. Thank you so much for sitting down with us. Pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Now, you're someone who very much has seen so many changes to Poland. I know that some of the things you've said earlier in this talk, all the things that people didn't believe actually worked, the good economy, defense, everything. So let's start with that. What is your most optimistic current characteristic of Poland? Where do you see Poland now in the next 5-10 years?
You're right that Poland worked not one but two miracles. The first miracle was the peaceful overthrow of communism. The second miracle was building a successful free market economy and democracy on the ruins of communism. And Poland succeeded. It exceeded the most optimistic projections, possibly the best generation in Poland's history, when democracy, security, and economics were all moving in the right direction. That prepares Poland to deal with the current situation where we have an aggressive Russia, a war in Ukraine, and political turmoil in Europe, especially Western Europe, and even a difficult election in the United States. Poland, to answer your questions plainly, is poised to play a leadership role in Europe. It is no longer a poor, marginal country. It is in the first rank of European countries. Well, its economy isn't on the level of France and Germany's, but it is growing rapidly. And its military is rapidly becoming a first-rate military and a large military in Europe. So Poland, moreover, Poland was right about Russia when so many other governments were wrong about Russia. So Poland is poised to play a major role, and not a moment too soon, because after the French elections and keeping in mind the way the U.S. elections may go, Poland is going to be a key member of, let us say, the free world.
On that note, because you touched on leadership there, and also I wanted to address this, and if we go back, when very much the realities of today, a new Cold War, if you will, for some nations, of course, a hot war in Ukraine. But if you look at some of the strong leaders of the Cold War, if we're looking at everyone from Truman, Eisenhower, and later Thatcher, I mean, these are strong personalities, people who corralled their nation, very much respected, and in some cases, I think probably feared on the Soviet side. If we look at the board now in terms of modern leadership in Europe and also in the United States and the Western world, do you sense that potentially one of our shortcomings is that we don't have such a case of strong leadership? Or who is that leader, or maybe a range of leaders that stick out to you that are similar to Eisenhower, that are similar to Reagan?
Well, remember, we look back through a gold gauze of nostalgia. At the time, Reagan didn't appear in most of Western Europe or even in the United States to be the great leader that Poles see in him, and saw in him even then. No one thought Eisenhower was a great leader. Truman's popularity was dismal, even though we look back and say, wait a minute, Truman got everything right. So don't look back with retrospective nostalgia and current despair. I think Joe Biden did a magnificent job rallying the West to support Ukraine. Joe Biden is over 80. He showed his age during the debate, and not in a good way. But he deserves credit for the leadership he showed. I think in Poland there is leadership. I think certainly President Duda has played a good role and could play a very good role working with Donald Trump. I think that Prime Minister Tusk is poised to be a real player in Europe. I think he is already fulfilling that role in a good way. I think Foreign Minister Sikorski is one of the strongest strategic thinkers in all of Europe. I recommend his Ditchley speech. He has been thinking about Poland's role in the West and in the free world since I've known him in the early 90s. So there is leadership. I think Macron was poised to be a leader, to be a major and consequential leader. This will be hurt by the elections. I think that there are many in the Green Party in Germany. I'm thinking of Foreign Minister Baerbock, who has taken bold positions. I think that Kaja Kallas is apt to be one of the most effective leaders of an EU foreign policy, and that will be needed after the French elections. So I think the leadership potential is there, and we need to get behind the right policies. Those of us who believe in the free world and the transatlantic relationship need to get behind the right set of policies and deal with the politics so that we help Ukraine succeed against Russian aggression and deal with the China challenge.
Mm-hmm. But back on the one note as well, I think that granted, President Biden has, given his age, even notwithstanding that, I mean, he has been very much corralling. That's true, but I think if we look at even Roosevelt with his daily addresses, I think connecting to the people, I think that's what's missing. If we look across Europe in particular, also to regard to the United States, very much the right is gaining because of charismatic leadership. If we look at Viktor Orban, if we look at Mr. Bardella in France, who in the last 24 hours garnered a lot of support there. So I meant it in that sense, is there, because the mission is there, but it's also the public that needs to understand it, and that's where the deficit is. And how can we change that? Because the European population, the Western population, the global population need to understand why this fight in Ukraine is worth winning. What can we do to make the public understand that more?
Make the case. I think the Polish government has made the case, and in Poland, a kind of centrist, center-right, center-left coalition has taken power, and I think that is a pro-free world government. Of course, President Duda there is strategic harmony in Poland about those major issues, and I'm grateful for that. I certainly think you're right that a lot of political strength is now flowing to some of the populists. I think Orban, frankly, has peaked. His flirtation with China is going to damage him with the Republicans and with the Trump people. I think that's a mistake by Orban, and he has few friends left. I think the Czech government has done a good job appealing to Central European sentiment as well. But I take your point. I take your point about the problem of right-wing nationalist as opposed to liberal right-wing charismatic leaders. This is a problem because too many of them are sympathetic to Vladimir Putin. Too many of them are reverting to previous European models of national rivalry. Now, I think one of the problems in West European political culture is that after 1945, patriotism was put under a cloud because nationalism was thoroughly discredited. I think in Poland, patriotism is linked, as it should be, and it is as it is in the United States, with universal values. Patriotism is at its strongest when it is linked with universal values, as opposed to America first and America only, for example. And I think that political leaders will need to find that kind of language. The link of the universal and the national is, after all, woven deeply into Western civilization. What is the United States except something based on universal values, right? That's the Declaration of Independence. It defines Americans as a nation created by belief in universal values of the equality of each person.
On that point of nationalism, patriotism, there is that case to be made that it only matters if you've got skin in the game. And I think if you look at some of the Baltic states, Estonia, Lithuania, the Nordic states also, to a certain extent Poland as well, national service or compulsory military service is either coming back, it's already been there for a while. We've seen that working very well in South Korea as well, where citizens do and must be engaged to understand what it means to be connected with their country, as JFK once said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Would you say that that's something that needs to come back in some way, some kind of connection, compulsory service to the armed forces in Europe, or potentially also the United States, to have the public, the young public, understand what's really at stake here?
You're asking two different things, well, related. One is a sense of duty and purpose, and an understanding that patriotism sometimes requires sacrifice and service. And that is understood in the Baltic states, it's understood in Poland. Polish culture is very strong, and the memories of war and occupation are deep. And the post-World War II memories build on the memories of divided Poland after 1795. Whether or not this is best strengthened through compulsory military service is something that I have mixed feelings about. But I agree with and take your point about the underlying need for people to have a renewed sense of patriotism, but not tied to a nationalist definition, tied to a universalist definition. And that isn't just a kind of modern left-wing fetish, as some people claim in the United States. That goes back to the Enlightenment, and it goes back 1,000 years. I mean, what is the notion of European Christendom except a sense that the nation must be linked to higher purposes, which then is changed in the Enlightenment, the Polish Constitution of 1791 and the US Constitution. The national cause grounded in universal values. And the politicians who can raise that spirit are going to be the ones to stand up against the hard nationalist right. But those divisions lie in, the line of that division goes through every nation. Every nation has that divide. Every nation has its good side and its other side. And that certainly goes for the United States. And we're in a period of difficulty right now because some of those lessons are forgotten, but not as forgotten in Poland as in some other countries. Because after all, look around you. It's a miracle what happened in Poland. And it happened because Solidarity and the Polish democratic opposition drew on the best possible Polish traditions, which were drawn from the best possible Western traditions. And that's what's needed.
I think also if you go into Polish history, you'll find, as you said, those Enlightenment values very much here, very much in Poland, and I think hopefully now, as you said, universal values for the future. Ambassador Daniel Fried, thank you so much for all that. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And that's all for this conversation. Stay tuned. That was Sasha Farbach for TVP World.